Whether you're a veteran in youth ministry or you just started last week, today's episode has something in store for you. We're going to be talking with Josh Griffin about his ministry at Mariners, what he does with Download Youth Ministry, and what they're cooking up very, very soon for those that are just starting in student ministry. Get ready for the Student Ministry Podcast. Welcome to the Student Ministry Podcast. My name is Steve Cullum. I'm your host. And today, like I said, we're going to be talking with Josh Griffin. Josh is a veteran youth worker who has a couple different ministries that he works with right now. One is his local church there at Mariners in Southern California as a middle school pastor, but he's also the co-founder of Download Youth Ministry. If you're unfamiliar with DYM, make sure you do check out their website. They've got tons of resources for youth workers by youth workers. I've got a few of my own products up there on the site. Be sure to check those out, and if you like them, that'd be great. So let me know and purchase them and everything. Some games and some teaching resources there, but there's a bunch of other great resources there. And one of the other resources that they're working on right now is around those that are in their first few years of youth ministry. So I'm really excited for you to hear what Josh and Doug and the rest of the team is cooking up, but also to get to know Josh just a little bit more. Maybe you've seen him from afar or you know about him, but today he's going to talk about his story and about his ministry, and you get to see just a peek behind the curtain a little bit to what goes into his ministry and also what they are cooking up for those that are just starting out in ministry. And I'm so excited for you to hear today's episode. Before we jump into that, I do want to just ask that if you like what you hear here, be sure to recommend it to other youth pastors that are out there, other youth workers that need to hear these episodes as well. A lot of people are looking for podcasts these days, and if you like the Student Ministry Podcast, be sure to recommend it to others. Also, be sure to check out our sponsor for this episode of the Student Ministry Podcast. G-Shades is a youth ministry curriculum and teaching strategy focused on helping students see every life situation through the lens of the gospel. There's several options to fit everyone with 3 plans to choose from. This curriculum gives you the resources that you need to do what you do better. Do you need message outlines, a discussion guide, and a game? That's just $16 a month. If you're looking for a higher production value, including bumper videos, Instagram devotionals, and parent guides, that's $25 a month. And do you want an affordable youth ministry video curriculum that can help you increase your online reach during this pandemic? G-Shades has you covered for $36 a month. You will not find a better youth ministry video curriculum at that price point anywhere. G-Shades really sets itself apart by helping students see the gospel applies to every life situation that is out there. And if you want to find out more about Mike Haynes, the founder of G-Shades, you can check out episodes 32 and 55 of the Student Ministry Podcast. So go ahead and head over to gshades.org to download Season 3 of G-Shades Youth Ministry Curriculum. And be sure to use the promo code TSMPOD for the Student Ministry Podcast at checkout to get an extra 10% off. gshades.org and use the promo code TSMPOD. G-Shades, seeing life through the lens of the gospel. You can find the link for G-Shades in the podcast show notes. Thanks so much, G-Shades, for sponsoring this episode of the Student Ministry Podcast. All right, now it's time to get in this conversation with the middle school pastor of Mariners Church and the co-founder of Download Youth Ministry, Josh Griffin. Well, Josh Griffin, thanks so much for being on the Student Ministry Podcast.
Thanks, man. Honored to be here. I appreciate it. Thanks for the invitation.
Yeah, no problem. So Josh, I know a lot of people know you from your ministry, but also Download Youth Ministry and the various ways that you're connected with the youth ministry world. But maybe some people don't know a little more about your story and how you got to be a Christian and got into ministry in the first place. So I'd love to start there. Let's hear a little bit about what God has been doing in your life to bring you to this point.
Yeah, right on. Thanks for the kind words. I would say just for way of introduction, I am a junior high pastor at the moment. I've been doing a youth ministry a long time. I'm an old man, is what that means. And had the privilege of running a company called DownloadYouthMinistry.com, which is just providing killer resources made by youth workers for cheap. So stuff you can use in your youth ministry tonight. So the things that you need, videos, games, resources, whatever, that is the grind that you have to find or discover or plan. It's done for you, and it's inexpensive, and it's the best. So to back way up from there, which I love. I love being a husband. I have 4 kids. Junior high ministry is the best. I don't know. I think I used to love high school ministry the most, if I'm honest with you. I've done a church where did both too. But junior high ministry is kind of the new high school ministry. And I think high school ministry is the new college ministry. But that's from an old person who's seen more than me, otherwise you don't know the difference. But
that's interesting. Actually, I'm gonna cut you off, because I was actually just thinking the same thing the other day when I was talking to our kids pastor about how, like, I feel like I'm seeing the same things in the 4th and 5th graders that I saw in middle schoolers a few years ago.
Exactly.
So, yeah,
exactly. That's precisely why I was having the conversation with our children's pastor. And I said, honestly, we should move 4th and 5th grade into our youth space, because they are not kids anymore. And a few years ago, or when I started a couple decades ago, kids are kids and they're fine. And junior hires were so excited to move up. And now it's like they're basically, the pre-teenager is a teenager now. So, and I've experienced that as a dad of 4 teenagers and now a couple of adult children too. I've seen it get younger with each kid. So, which is scary as well, but anyhow. So I started out, I became a follower of Jesus really early in my life, raised up in kind of a fundamental Christian home, parents that loved me, had no idea how good my family was and how awesome and blessed I was to grow up in that family, until much later when I was in college. I went, oh, we have something special here. And my parents they love each other and they love me. And I had no idea how big of a deal that was. And in college, I totally understood, because I saw just the shambles all around, So was in business management, which ironically, my son is in business management right now at college. And I said, I never want to be a pastor. And my dad was a pastor for a portion of me growing up. And I just knew that wasn't for me. And then my senior year, a dean of men, and my football coach and other people who are really influential in my life said, you're supposed to be a youth pastor. Everybody knows it. How do you not know it? And I just laughed. And then I couldn't shake that conversation. You know how it is when a mentor speaks something into your life, which, as an aside, I want to do that regularly now. I want to see something in someone else that maybe they don't see, because that was meaningful to me. And I couldn't shake it. I went to my fiance and I said, I think I'm supposed to be a youth pastor. And she's like, I knew it. And she was so excited and like crying. And it was the best. She's like, I was supposed to marry you, but I was supposed to marry a pastor. And this is awesome. And then I went to my dad, who had been a pastor for years. And I said, I think I'm supposed to be a pastor, a youth pastor. And he said, a whole life, he was like, don't be a pastor. Don't be a pastor. Like so many sons or children follow in their parents, like, don't be a pastor. Be what God wants you to be. And then I told him, I said, Dad, I think I'm supposed to be a pastor. And he got real emotional and he said, oh, I've known that for years. I just wanted to make sure you heard it from your heavenly Father's voice and not your father's voice. And I said, Dad, I'm going to tell that story the rest of my life. I'm going to hold on to that one, and have jumped right into youth ministry. So started out, my first few years in youth ministry were rough. I made every mistake you can make. I just about destroyed that ministry and church. I made fun of the past. I made changes too quickly. I didn't keep in any type of communication with my senior leader. I thought I was good enough to do youth ministry alone. Like literally every classic mistake you can make, I made it. And I was really good at making those mistakes. And had just about quit youth ministry. Actually, technically did quit youth ministry. And I handed my resignation letter in about 2 years in, which, as an aside, is like what every youth so many youth ministries end a year and a half to 2 years. So I was one of them. And I turned in my resignation and said, it's not for me. I'm going to go back to school. That was my disguise. But I don't like this church. I don't like their beliefs. I don't like the senior pastor. I don't like anything. I'm done. And I read a book in that summer. So the senior pastor was probably very excited. And the board said, no, we don't accept your resignation, essentially. And we want you to stay on through the summer. You're not going back to school till the fall anyhow. And I read this book called Purpose Driven Youth Ministry. And I went to this conference out in California. We were in Michigan at the time. And just was blown away by it. And I went, oh my goodness, if this is what youth ministry is, I could give the rest of my life to this. And we went back to that church and God did a miracle. Like there's still challenges and still had made a ton of mistakes and paid those consequences. And the senior pastor and I didn't become best friends and ride off into the sunset together. It was still very challenging, but stayed at that church for 5 or even close to 6 more years and watched God do incredible things. So I feel, and then since then I moved out to California to the church actually that we visited that for that conference called Saddleback Church. Was there, did high school ministry, a part of that church for 13 years. And then during that time started Download Youth Ministry. We started YM University, youthministryuniversity.com. We launched the National Day of Training to help youth workers all over the country. So it just became this explosion of God doing a youth ministry work in our hearts and lives. And Doug Fields, who wrote the book, First 2 Years in Youth Ministry, and I are best friends. And so we hang out we were texting right before the show. And we hang out every day. We talk youth ministry every day. We work at Mariners, my current church, together every day. And so it's a privilege to give my life to youth ministry. So youth ministry kind of multiple ways, right? Like my church, first and foremost. I think if you're looking at resources or curriculum or whatever, like make sure it's in the church, make sure it's founded and grounded in God's word and people that you can trust under the accountability of a church. I think that's important. People that know youth ministry.
Right.
And then, it's also a chance to serve the people that I love the most. So I love my church and I love youth workers. And so the only people I'd rather hang out with at lunch than my teenagers is youth workers who hang out with their teenagers.
Yeah.
And it's been a fun journey together. Could never have dreamt it. And I'm very thankful and so honored to do stuff like this, to hang out on your show and encourage youth workers and point them towards resources to hopefully not make the same mistakes I did. And do youth ministry better.
Yeah. Well, Josh, I just want to say thanks because I know it had to be kind of a little bit of a dream come true to be able to work alongside and now be best friends with the guy that wrote the book that saved your ministry, essentially.
Exactly.
And but now, like me being someone that looks up to Doug, but also you and other people in that world, consider you guys mentors from afar. And it's so cool to be able to have this kind of a relationship, to be able to talk with you guys, because so many times it's like, oh, that's, we're distant from them or whatever, but we've actually got to hang out and this is, we get to talk and stuff like that, which is really, really cool.
Well, exactly. Yeah. Not just at conferences and stuff too, but like you've been to my church, like you see the real deal, the good, bad, and ugly. And, I feel like social media has helped close some of that gap for a lot of people. But my hope is, like when I met Doug, I was more impressed by him as a person than his persona. And I want to continue to do that as well. If someone's like, oh, your ministry looks cool on social media, or thank you for that tip, it helped me, or whatever. I want people to be like, man, Josh cares for me, loves me, and is resourcing me, because I genuinely feel that way. Now I'm a 7 on the Enneagram, if that matters to you at all, which means I'm everybody's best friend, and love partying. So it's true. Like I want to be your best friend in youth ministry. I want to change youth ministry at its core, like on the national or even international level. Like I want to help youth workers stay in youth ministry. I want to raise the level of, yes, production and caliber of stuff we put on the screen, all that, but also like I want to raise a generation of disciples of Jesus too. So I'm passionate about those things. I'm giving my life to it. I'm 47 as of this show, and I'm an old man in youth ministry, but this is all I know. And it's all I'm going to do. And that's how a lot of youth workers don't get the privilege of staying in youth ministry. They become, they take a demotion and become a senior pastor or whatever,
Right.
or on to other great things. I've worked with tons of youth workers that have moved on to other positions or even outside of the church, parachurch, whatever. I'm thankful for all of them because youth ministry is in your blood.
Mm-hmm.
Like even our senior pastor right now, he used to be a youth worker and he just thinks differently.
Yeah.
And I'm so thankful for that he was a youth worker so that I can tap into that because I know that guy. I don't know the senior pastor world at all.
Right.
I'm glad I don't.
Mm-hmm.
But I do know the youth ministry world, and so does he. So a massive benefit is having people that have done youth ministry all over the world in all sorts of different professions or roles in the church too.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Josh, we're going to ask a little questions around, like, especially your passion, especially what Download Youth Ministry is doing for this next generation of youth workers. But before that, I want you to just dig into your ministry specifically there at Mariners. What does it look like for you to be the middle school pastor? What's your program structure look like? So that maybe we can see, from the outside in. It is a large church, but there are things that all churches of all size can learn from that.
Yeah, we're a large church. So I do 5 junior high services every weekend. So this past week, I just started a series on the book of Ephesians called The Final Countdown. It's some of the stories and events from the life of Paul as he is about to be, he's in prison during Ephesians. He's about to be beheaded, all that stuff. And what do we learn in his words that are so important? So I'm teaching that 5 times, which is crazy because in my youth group, when I started, you teach it once and you're like, that's pretty good. I don't know. And now it's like, now I'm debriefing it. I'm making it better. I'm working on the time. I'm trying to really become a masterful communicator. It's so much work. So 5 services every weekend. That's a drag. It's a grind, but it's also awesome. And get to hang out with students every day. It's the best. Then I do Download Youth Ministry a couple days a week as well. Then back to the church world. So I'm kind of juggling a little bit. And in that case, making sure that the volunteers are taken care of and encouraged and trained. So we'll do the National Day of Training, but also we'll have the volunteers at my house on Wednesday. So we got 30 volunteers, which is amazing because my youth group when I started was 30 kids. So now I'm in a church that has 30 volunteers.
Yeah.
They're all going to be at my house and we're going to have food and we're going to laugh together. We play Jackbox games on the Xbox. And it's just a chance to like pour into them, love them, encourage them. We do a life groups on Wednesday nights. And this training is between we have spring break in here. And so we take off a little bit at Christmas, a little bit at spring break, a little bit over the summer. And it's just a chance to give them a shot in the arm and encourage them, fire them up. And also if there's any, I shouldn't say if there's any, where there is drama or problems in their groups, we can help talk it out and help them, fix some of those issues too. Just relationship is the key. Like to me, relational youth ministry is the foundation of youth ministry. So pouring into your volunteers, loving them, training them, encouraging them, doing life with them. One of our volunteers is in Poland right now, working with some refugee camps. And so her co-leader is really stepping up, but what a testimony and what a story for Irina as she's gone this week, and amazing. And I have a co-leader and he's on paternity leave. I think that's right.
Yeah.
Because they just had a new baby. And so we did a big diaper shower. So I'm talking about like small church, in the weeds, grinding it out ministry. Now it is at a big church, but I think big churches are fighting to be small, and small churches actually have some huge advantages. Like the church I grew up in, I was one of 12 kids in the whole youth ministry. Man, I was known, loved, cared for, discipled. Jim was our youth pastor. He was a volunteer firefighter and a volunteer youth worker. I actually don't know how he made his money. I don't know how he made a living, but he did, figured it out. And I'm so thankful for a youth group of 12. And so if you're listening and you're like, oh, yes, nice, mega church guy rolling in with all this. No, I would say the mega church is trying to be like you. They're trying to be a youth group of 12 and you have such power. So it's a big church. It's a lot of work, high expectations. We added streaming during the pandemic. So if you go to Mariners JHM on YouTube every Saturday night, you can see a streaming service. We just added a weekly testimony show where a student in our junior high ministry will share their testimony. It's called The Inside Out. And every week, when we're doing life groups. So we take off again a little bit, but
Mm-hmm.
every week we'll release a show on Instagram that is a kid talking about their faith, sharing their story, their testimony. And it's been incredible to see the response. So we're trying to really respect the new day, the digital and the pivot to online. Like, let's embrace that. Like, youth ministry was way behind in that space. And so I feel like we can move it forward and not just go back to the way it was too.
Yeah.
So anyhow, I'm thankful for small churches. Like, I'm a product of one. My first church was 30 kids in the whole youth ministry. And even now in a larger church, I'm fighting to make it small, to be relational, to have total access, to know your life, to know your challenges and your faith. So yeah, that's it.
That's cool. Yeah, I noticed the other day, we've started to do a little bit more of that small church thing, even at a kind of a medium-sized church. And we're purposely making some events smaller. Like, hey, I'm only going to take the ones that can fit in the church van with me, and that's it. So sign up early.
I love it.
But it gives me that opportunity. And like, now I've got like 10 students that I can really pour into, and it feels like that small church days. But it's great because now I'm going to have a relationship with those 10 students that I didn't have before. So.
Yeah, one great example we did on Sunday was our services have a lot of kids in it. You can be lost in the crowd pretty easily. So we added this thing called New Student Lunch. It's a very technical name. Pretty high-end branding. I know.
How long did it take you to come up with that name?
I know, we're so genius. So a kid who shows up at youth group or one of our weekend services can literally be like, Mom, can I stay for New Student Lunch? And parents are stoked, even though it's like, well, we were going to go to whatever, but they're like, who cares? My kid wants to go to something at church, like they're in.
Yeah.
And it's just a chance for us to sit around a table with 5 or 6. The first one, full disclosure, 2 kids. So it was very small.
Mm-hmm.
That sit around, Sunday was 5 or 6 kids. We brought a couple student leaders in as well, just to make sure a little bit more of a crowd and get to know some kids. And it's a game changer. Like, I know those kids' names, their story, their life, because we're changing the relational status from like, you're a member of the crowd to no, like, you're in the community here. You're part of our group. And eventually, obviously, we're trying to help them become a core student as well. So yeah.
That's so good. So Josh, I know you guys are doing a lot, or starting to do a lot more around helping people that are just beginning their first few years of youth ministry. So talk to us a little about what led to this point, because I know you guys have got some things in the working, but and then we can kind of talk about the details of what you got going on. But what kind of led you guys to get to this point where, hey, we needed to start doing more for this next generation of youth workers?
Totally. Well, the pandemic has fundamentally shifted youth ministry and the position of youth pastor and youth worker, youth director, whatever your title is or whatever. And the idea was there's a lot of people that are going to be leaving youth ministry or left, and then a lot of people stepping in this transitional time. And because everybody was isolated and alone, we're also distanced further than ever before. So could there be in this new generation of youth workers an opportunity for us to really help them start right? Or even those that have been in youth ministry for a while to like get back to the fundamentals of what makes youth ministry great. And so Doug Fields wrote the book called First 2 Years in Youth Ministry, available on Amazon for 20 years, bestseller, blah, 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 blah.
Great.
He's awesome. It's a great book. And in it, he lists out the 9 or 10 commitments that I will make in my first 2 years. So we were talking about that going, man, we're helping youth workers train their team with YM University or National Day. We're helping resource youth workers by providing X, Y, and Z, videos, games, teaching, like so easy. What about the newbie who has no place to start? Now, maybe they, volunteered. Like they're like, hey, I want to go to the bathroom. And they're like, you're the youth pastor. Or maybe they're trained. I don't know. But chances are, there's a volunteer firefighter named Jim out there who got tasked with running the youth group who could really use some help. There's a ton of volunteer middle-aged women and men who are running youth ministry around the country. Now, I'm privileged to work at a church, be paid by a church, and be a professional. But the vast majority of youth ministry is barely paid or
Mm-hmm.
not paid at all, and barely educated in youth ministry, or maybe know a little bit because they were mentored a little by somebody, but there's a massive gap.
Mm-hmm.
So thought, and legitimately the prayer, is to go, could we help this next generation of youth workers, in particular the part-time, the volunteer, or the full-time but brand spanking new?
Mm-hmm.
Could we teach them what they didn't learn in seminary, what they didn't learn on their own, and help them avoid the mistakes that so many youth workers make, including many that end up quitting after a couple years, just
Yeah.
like me.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so good. And I know, like, just from what you guys have done so far with Youth Ministry University, the National Day of Training, I know our volunteers have already thanked me so many times. They're like, thank you for providing this training. And I'm like, I just push play. Like DYM is the ones, giving us this, but they're thankful for that so much. And so I know what you guys are cooking up is going to be great for these new youth workers. I've been so privileged to be a part of all the DYM events, DYM 100, 200, all that stuff. So I know it's going to be great, but what can you tell us about what you're cooking up for these new youth workers?
Yeah, I'd say if you're new in youth ministry, or want to return to the basics, maybe that would be a way of putting it as well. Your first, someone's like, what is first few years? I'm like, I don't know. You decide. You decide what that, it's 2, but it could also be 3 or 5 or, 0. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
The idea is if you go to firstfewyears.com, first place, 1ST, firstfewyears.com, there's a chance to get on the email list and be alerted to everything we're going to do. But we're launching right away with a First Few Years in Youth Ministry conference in October of 2022, and it is going to be a blast. So download Youth Ministry. Doug and I create events that we want to go to. And so, Steve, as you know, you've been to several. We like to pull out all sorts of unexpected tricks and fun. I would say the difference with this one is we have a really clear path of content that we want to make sure you get. So it'll still be DYM and magical and fun and awesome, but it will be more content centered than anything we've offered before. We're not bringing in speakers. We're bringing in youth workers, people who know youth ministry and worked in their church yesterday, or work with teenagers every day. So if you're like, it looks like kind of a different group of speakers than most, I would say, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's what we're trying to do. You can go to any event and get leadership principles from some guy who did youth ministry for a week before becoming a senior pastor or whatever, or some guy who's famous on Instagram because they lead their messages have lots of good tweetable type of phrases or whatever. That's great. I'm in. I love attending those. I'm all for it. We want to help youth pastors and the youth workers that are ahead of you or way ahead of you or have left a legacy in youth ministry. That's who we want at this event and on our podcast, on our new training videos that we're going to release. Everything is going to be centered around the first few years of youth ministry. I think it'll be beneficial to anybody, but really, if you're starting out right, this is the resource I wish I had. I wouldn't have quit at 2 years. At Download Youth Ministry, we work with youth workers all over the country, and the turnover is staggering.
Yep.
Genuinely staggering. And I've had the privilege of working at some churches for a very long time. That is not the norm. Doug has served at 2 churches in his career for decades. That is not normal. And I think we're going to attempt to teach you how to stay at a church through the thick and thin, through tough leadership, maybe toxic leadership, rough parents, abysmal seasons of change, how to keep your heart fresh. We're going to go after the stuff, the pitfalls that I made and that you made that you don't have to make.
Yeah. And
I think it's going to be helpful. So if you want to get more details on the conference, you can go to firstfewyears.com and find out about it there. Or Doug and I's kind of side little website is called More Than Dodgeball. You can jump on More Than Dodgeball. You can register for the event. I would think it'll probably sell out in a couple weeks because people are really excited about this, and there's a lot of hungry youth workers
Yeah.
to do this a long time. So I'd say sign up sooner rather than later, but there's room right now. So
Yeah.
go nuts.
Yeah. And you guys are keeping it as a smaller group on purpose for that, so you can really, really connect. And I love that about the Wham 100 and 200 because it feels more like an intimate group that actually connected with each other.
Exactly. Yeah. You could see someone on stage and then they disappear.
Mm-hmm.
I was at a Phil Wickham concert one time, and he was home in his hotel on his limo before we had left the room, because they were still singing. And he is, I'm just teasing. Love you, Phil. Not that you'll ever hear this, but or whoever, the insert of like that mega church pastor is up on the stage and whoa.
Yeah.
And we just want to change that, where we're going to hang out and sit at your table during the discussion. And you're going to have, we actually have some fun things planned where you're going to have access to every speaker like never before. So if you're like, oh, she was awesome. Katie Edwards is teaching on parents and volunteer.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to spend a little time with Katie. It's built into the program.
Mm-hmm.
So there's some things like that I think are really different. The number of people attending will be small. We'll launch some courses and stuff to help people that can't like make it to the event. Mm-hmm. But to me, the first few years conference is going to be the game changer.
That's
yeah,
cool.
For sure.
That's cool.
You know how it is. You go to an event,
Totally.
It's the best. Like it's the plane ride or the drive. Mm-hmm. It's the laughter. It's the Airbnb with other people that you split 10 different ways or whatever.
Yeah.
It's the meals. I think the program will be pretty great, but that whole experience, especially after this pandemic, it's going to be so helpful.
Absolutely. So, yeah. And little did you know that Phil's actually one of the biggest fans of the podcast. No, I'd be really surprised.
That would be amazing. Someone's going to clip this and be like, hey, he used you as an example. I was kidding. I just made up a name. Sorry.
Oh, but I love what you guys are thinking around that, because I know there's been a lot more focus on helping youth workers that have been in it for a while, which is great. We need that. We need, the burnout that's happening, all that stuff. It's really unfortunate. People need to be reacting to that. But I love what you guys are doing around being proactive. Let's help these new youth workers like not get into those situations and help them be able to be in it for the long haul, because we know that's where the game changing happens, is when people are in ministry for longer than, just a year or two. It takes those year after year after year building those relationships, and the time, you need the time to do it.
Exactly. And I would say we have the credibility. Doug Fields is literally the authority on this. Like, I would have given anything for this event 25 years ago when I started. Mm-hmm. And now we get to create and shape this thing. And I'm very, very excited. I'm hoping, honestly, I hope it's part of the legacy that we get to leave in youth ministry, that, man, we can help raise a whole generation of youth workers who raised a generation of disciples who changed the world. So we have big goals, big ideas, but it's a small event. And I think it'll be cool though.
Yeah. So cool. So Josh, before we leave, I'd love for you got an opportunity, a bunch of youth workers that are listening to this podcast. What's some encouragements or wisdom that you'd like to drop on them before you leave today?
Yeah. As we were planning the content for first few years, the one that really resonated with me was how we minister sometimes out of a spiritual emptiness, and how I could fake that really well because I've been around Christianity my whole life. And so you couldn't tell if I had spent time with Jesus or where my heart was or anything, because I was a great actor. And so I would just encourage to the actor in all of us, the imposter in all of us, the thespian who's listening today, which I think is everybody, like to some degree, certainly some more than others, to get away and just exhale a little bit and talk to Jesus and reveal the condition of your heart to him. I just did youth ministry for a long time, and my well was bone dry and my heart was completely empty. And some of the first content we'll teach at first few years is the importance of walking with Jesus. And while that might feel expected or trite even, I would say it's essential. And so periods of empty. You're giving out all of the time.
Yep.
And so you're constantly moving towards empty. And so just know that, and know what fills, obviously God's Spirit fills your tank and gives strength in our weakness. And I'm here for it. I'm in it. But also, for me, it's playing video games with my kids. It is playing pickleball with my dude friends last night, and it was awesome. I only lost twice. We played 12 games. It was amazing.
Nice.
It's asking my wife to go out on a date. It is, debriefing a conversation that was really rough with your leader or supervisor, executive pastor, whatever. And I was helping a youth worker today, and she was like, I just had this really tough conversation, and they slowed this process way down. And she was pissed. And I said, hey, whoa, God is teaching you patience right here. So get with somebody who can talk you off of the ledge, somebody who can encourage you, and realign your heart with what God is doing. And then just as a free aside, I know you didn't ask for two, but I'm going to give you one.
Good.
Just be focused on the stories of life change in the nitty gritty of church ministry and politics and the drama and helicopter parents. Don't forget about individual stories of life change. And so there's one that I'm holding on to right now that is an amazing story that I need, because there's some drama in our church and in our, some families. And I want to hold on to those specific good individual stories as I deal with some of the higher level drama and pain in my church too.
That's good. Josh, before we wrap up, I do need to ask, what's your excitement level for Obi-Wan, and what are you most excited to see?
Oh my. Well, I know this is an audio podcast, but if you could see my collection of Star Wars paraphernalia in my office, you would be impressed. That I'm holding up a vintage biker scout figure, so
Nice.
Steve can enjoy that. It's like a $300 action figure.
That's awesome.
I could not be more excited for Star Wars anything, but also Obi-Wan. Book of Boba Fett was fine. It was fine.
Yeah.
Mandalorian, unbelievable. Perfection. Obi-Wan, my expectations are through the roof. And that's going to be tough to beat. So we'll see. There's a lot of great shows, a lot of great video games, a lot of fun diversions to be refueled on and have some entertainment when you get back to the
Lego Star Wars game just came out.
Yes, I'm playing it tonight with my daughter.
Nice.
I can't wait.
Nice.
I'm playing Halo with my son and Lego Star Wars with my daughter. And then I did my oldest son, we did his taxes. So life changes a little bit.
There you go. Well, Josh, where's the best place for people to connect with you and follow up? Maybe they got some follow-up questions or want to check out. You mentioned first few years earlier, but what's the other places to connect with you?
Yeah, definitely firstfewyears.com or More Than Dodgeball, Download Youth Ministry, all that stuff for sure. For me personally, it's at Joshua Griffin on Instagram. One of the things I've been having a lot of fun with lately is as I'm learning something or I see something that it's transferable, I'll do like an extended story about it. So if you go to my profile, you can see like our new student welcome box. It's pretty impressive. I'm not going to lie to you. And I take it all apart so you can see every element and why we chose that. Or our follow-up plan for kids on the weekend. We wear name tags in our junior high ministry. The little system spits out a little name tag. So I talked about how adding a little bit of personality to something as trivial as the name tag matters. So I'm trying to always find youth ministry tidbits and goodness that's transferable. So if you're like, oh, we need a new student welcome box too. We put one together. It's very inexpensive. And I think it'll inspire you to put some good stuff in there. So so check it out. Instagram is probably the best way at Joshua Griffin.
That's cool. Yeah. I in particular, when you started talking about your how you guys do life groups and with the seasons and everything, I remember you explaining that within your Instagram. And I was like, oh, maybe that's a good idea. Maybe I should rethink that. So
dude,
that was really
I'll
helpful.
say this. Thank you. That's very kind. It was a game changer. We're only 1 year in, but I'll just give you the short of it. When people sign up for a life group or whatever, it's at the beginning of the year and you kind of really don't talk about it again. And if kids are in, lacrosse season or they drop out, there's no like re-engagement. It's just one and done. So the idea with seasons or sessions or whatever, chapters, whatever you want to call them, is you have some easy on ramps and some easy off ramps. So it's like you're in the group for 10 weeks and then, take a couple weeks off, we'll do another one, but now we can promote it. It's like it's launching, there's momentum again. It's great. And plus your leaders need a little break. It lets them go over to my house and eat food and get trained. And if a kid has a sports season and they're not in session 2, it's okay. And it's expected rather than like, hey, you didn't show up for 10 weeks. Like, no, I have a sports season. I can't come on Wednesday nights or whatever. And it has been a game changer to think in terms of like trimesters versus a whole year of something. So cool. Anyway, I'm glad that was helpful. Awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Josh, it's been great to have you on the podcast. It's been great to know you as a friend and a resource for so many different youth pastors out there. Thanks for all you do, and God bless your ministry.
Thanks, Steve. I appreciate it. Thanks for letting me on the show.
And thank you all for being here for this episode. I hope you all enjoyed hearing a little more about Josh's story, but also about his ministry there at Mariners, Download Youth Ministry, but also what they are planning for those that are in their first few years of student ministry. I know that's an area that's been really growing in my heart. So for those of you that are out there or just getting ready to start in student ministry, first of all, thank you so much for checking out this podcast. But just know that those of us that are veterans, we're praying for you. We want to do what we can to help you, to set you up for success. We're so excited about what God is going to do through you in the ministry, and welcome to the team. Also, I wanted to let you all know that I'll be heading down to the Orange Conference again this year. They're bringing it back finally after a couple years of hiatus with the pandemic and all that stuff. And so if you are down in Atlanta for the Orange Conference, be sure to hit me up. I'd love to meet you in person and talk about the podcast. If you guys got some suggestions, some ideas and things like that, I'd love to hear them in person as well. Also, we want to thank the sponsor of this episode of the Student Ministry Podcast. Be sure to check out gshades.org and use the promo code TSMPOD to receive 10% off your order. Thanks so much to G Shades for sponsoring this episode of the Student Ministry Podcast. Be sure to check out their website. The link for G Shades and all the links talked about in this episode will be in the podcast show notes, so be sure to check that out. And thanks again for being here for this episode. We're so grateful for you, our listeners. And if you have not done so yet, be sure to share this with another youth worker that you think would enjoy these conversations. Thanks so much, and God bless your ministry.